Caitlin Clark got fined $200 in September 2025 for writing 3 words on Instagram after a playoff win. Refs couldn't stop us. That fine tells you everything about how the WNBA's officiating crisis became a numbers game nobody wanted to solve, and why the league's fastest rising superstar walked a tightrope between suspension and silence her entire rookie year. Most people think this story is about hard fouls and hurt feelings. The real story lives in probability calculations, structural pay gaps, and a missing accountability system that exists in every other major basketball league. We pulled the flagrant foul data, the technical foul timeline, the pay structure docs, and statements from the head of officiating himself to answer 3 questions that determine whether Clark is facing bias, bad luck, or a broken system. What do the actual foul statistics reveal about how Clark is officiated compared to the rest of the league? Why does the WNBA lack the same referee accountability mechanisms the NBA uses? And what financial and structural forces explain why this controversy keeps escalating instead of getting resolved? Let's start with the numbers referees would rather you didn't run. The most damning evidence comes from an independent statistical analysis of every flagrant foul called during the 2024 WNBA regular season. 35 flagrant fouls were whistled that year across the entire league. 6 of them were against Caitlin Clark. That's 17.1% of all flagrants directed at one player. The kicker? A probability analysis using a Poisson distribution, which assumes fouls happen uniformly over time, calculated that if everyone had the same chance of being fouled, the probability of Clark being on the receiving end of 6 flagrants was 0.001%, 1 in 100,000. 4 of those 6 flagrants came from Chicago Sky players, meaning 11.4% of all flagrant fouls league-wide were Sky players fouling Clark. The analyst who ran these numbers made it clear, this doesn't automatically prove targeting, but it statistically rules out random chance. 3 factors could explain it: players with ill intentions toward a specific person, a player requiring more defensive intensity than opponents are used to, or referees being especially cautious around a specific individual. All 3 appear to be in play with Clark, but the question everyone argues about is whether the bias comes from the players or the refs. The evidence suggests both. By early June 2024, Clark had been fouled 46 times, the 3rd most in the league despite being a rookie. She was also involved in 78 total whistles for and against, more than any other player. The Sheddy Carter shoulder block on June 1, 2024 became the flashpoint. Carter leveled Clark away from the ball with a shoulder check that knocked her to the floor. Refs called it a common foul during the game. The league upgraded it to a flagrant 1 the next day. Chicago Sky coach Teresa Weatherspoon called it not appropriate and said the team would learn from it. Clark downplayed it publicly, but on May 28th, just days earlier, she told reporters something that would define her rookie year. "I think everybody is physical with me. They get away with things that probably other people don't get away with." That wasn't speculation. That was lived experience translated into diplomatic language. But the bigger systemic issue isn't the physical fouls Clark endures. It's the technical fouls she receives for reacting to them. Clark racked up 6 technical fouls during her 2024 rookie season, 1 shy of an automatic suspension. The league hands out a 1-game ban at 7 techs. One of those techs came on August 18, 2024, when Clark slapped the padded stanchion behind the basket in frustration after missing a shot. Not at another player, not at a ref, at a padded pole. Fans erupted. One wrote, "Caitlin Clark just got a technical for hitting a pad because she was angry at herself. WNBA refs are cooked." That tech was her 5th of the season, putting her 2 away from suspension with 12 regular season games remaining. The Fever were fighting for a playoff spot, sitting 7th in the standings at 13 and 15. Losing Clark for even 1 game could have tanked their postseason hopes. On June 14, 2025, during a game against the New York Liberty, Clark made it very clear she disagreed with an out-of-bounds call and was hit with another tech. By the end of her rookie season, she avoided suspension by one technical. The pressure was so intense that Clark set a public goal for 2025, 2 technical fouls maximum. She told Coach Stephanie White directly. But that goal didn't stop the league from fining her $200 when she posted "Refs couldn't stop us" on Instagram after a September 2025 playoff win over the Atlanta Dream. Clark laughed it off, tweeting, "Got fined $200 for this, LOL," with laughing emojis. Teammate Sophie Cunningham joked that's gonna really break the bank for her, starting a GoFundMe now. But the fine sent a message. The WNBA doesn't want players publicly questioning officiating, even in jest, even when the stats back them up. And when you look at why the league is so defensive about its officiating, the structural inequalities explain everything. The WNBA doesn't have last 2-minute reports. The NBA has issued them for every close game since 2016, publicly grading every call in the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Incorrect calls are listed, correct calls are confirmed. It's accountability in writing. The WNBA has nothing like it. When asked about implementing L2M reports in a front office sports interview from October 2025, Sue Blouch, the Associate VP of WNBA Referee Performance and Development, said that job requires between 8 to 10 hours of work the day after games, which will require the WNBA investing in resources to hire someone. She added, "From our perspective, we don't have any issues owning up to our work, whether that's excellent work or a mistake that was made in a game. There's no objection on our part to an L2M. Translation, we do it if we had the budget. The league doesn't invest in the infrastructure." The same resource gap explains why WNBA referees are paid per game, not salaried. NBA refs earn between $600 and $900 per game, depending on experience, with salaries ranging from $250,000 to $550,000 annually. They're contractors, not employees. And they work NCAA games during the winter, which means they spend 5 months a year calling a different rule book with different standards for physicality. That's not a recipe for consistency. It's a recipe for exactly what players like Natasha Cloud described to ESPN in July 2025. If I can get a technical in the game from my emotions, I think the referees should be able to be reprimanded for their mistakes too. Cloud added, "I work my ass off all offseason for these 4.5 months to try to win a championship. And if I feel like refs are having too much impact on the game, it shouldn't be. This is collaborative to make this thing go." But the WNBA's head of officiating, Monty McCutchen, has a different take. In an ESPN interview, McCutchen said, "We have a strong belief that every WNBA official should apply a rule equitably and fairly every single time. We do not fine for judgment calls any more than players get fined for missing free throws, layups, or jump shots." That sounds reasonable until you realize the NBA fines and demotes refs who consistently blow calls. The WNBA grades officials through an independent review team, and poor performers don't get playoff assignments or extra income opportunities. But there's no public accountability, no L2M transparency, and no equivalent to the NBA's Secaucus Replay Center, where an independent crew reviews challenges. In the WNBA, the same refs who made the initial call review their own work on replay. It's a closed loop. The breaking point came on June 17, 2025, during an Indiana Fever game at the Connecticut Sun. The game escalated into 6 technical fouls and 3 ejections. Players were visibly furious. Fever coach Stephanie White didn't hold back in her post-game presser. "I think it was pretty obvious stuff was brewing, right? When the referees don't get control of the ball game, when they allow that stuff to happen, and it's been happening all season long, you've got competitive women who are the best in the world at what they do. And when you allow them to play physical and you allow these things to happen, they're going to compete and they're going to have their teammates' backs. It's exactly what you expect out of fierce competition." I started talking to the referees in the first quarter, and we knew this was going to happen. You could tell it was going to happen. So they got to get control of it. They got to be better. That same day, Sports Illustrated published a story titled, "The WNBA's officiating problem is bigger than Caitlin Clark." The author Emma Basellery wrote that the issue isn't about how opposing teams handle Clark. It's about the need for better, fairer, more consistent officiating across the entire WNBA. The structural comparison to the NBA made the disparity clear. NBA referees are salaried employees. WNBA referees are contractors. The NBA has an off-site replay center. The WNBA doesn't. The NBA publishes L2M reports. The WNBA doesn't. And when you pay refs $425 per game and ask them to switch rule sets every 6 months, you don't get elite consistency. You get what Indiana's beat writer Scott Agnes described on May 21st, 2025, during a fever dream game. This officiating crew has been bad. Bonner and Clark are furious.
Fever coach Steph White having to use a second challenge already because they've messed up another out-of-bounds call. Even broadcast analyst Debbie Antonelli openly criticized the review times, saying the league needs a rule to shorten them. When your own TV analysts are questioning officiating competence on air, you've lost the narrative. Here's what ties it all together. Clark isn't just a victim of bad calls. She's the most visible casualty of a systemic underinvestment in officiating infrastructure. The league exploded in popularity during her rookie year. Viewership spiked. Ticket sales surged. The Indiana Fever's franchise valuation hit $90 million, sixth in the league, largely on Clark's back. But none of that revenue translated into referee accountability systems, L2M transparency, or salaried officials. Instead, the league fined Clark $200 for saying refs couldn't stop us, issued vague statements about holding officials accountable, and hoped the controversy would fade. It didn't. By July 2025, ESPN's Maria Lawson reported that officiating had become one of the biggest storylines of the first half of the season. Players and coaches weren't asking for perfection. They wanted consistency and transparency. Becky Hammon, Natalie Nakase, Kelsey Plum, Angel Reese, and Clark herself all voiced frustrations publicly. McCutchen responded by saying, "We own the stuff that we need to own. We're really good about that and trying to get better." But when pressed about L2M reports, the league cited budget constraints. When asked about referee pay, they pointed to the revenue gap between the WNBA and NBA. The structural issues aren't Clark's fault, but she became the face of the problem because her statistical outlier status made the bias measurable. 1 in 100,000 odds of receiving 6 flagrants isn't a narrative, it's a data point. And when the league lacks the tools to audit itself, that data point becomes a rallying cry for everyone who believes refs are either unconsciously favoring physical play against her or consciously trying to manage her dominance. The irony is that Clark handled it better than the league did. She kept playing. She broke the rookie assist record. She made all WNBA first team. She finished 4th in MVP voting. And when the league fined her for a 3-word Instagram comment, she laughed it off publicly, while privately setting a goal to cut her technical fouls by 2/3. That's not someone trying to work the refs. That's someone adapting to a system that won't adapt to her. Meanwhile, the WNBA announced in October 2025 that it's forming an officiating task force to address the crisis. But no timeline, no budget, and no commitment to L2M reports. Just a promise to talk about it. Sophie Cunningham, Clark's teammate, summed up the player response when she told Yahoo Sports in June 2025 that if the officials don't take control of the situation, she will. That wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Because when the refs won't protect your franchise player and the league won't hold the refs accountable, teams start protecting their own. And that's how you get 6 techs, 3 ejections, and a game that ESPN called embarrassing for the league. Here's the bottom line. Caitlin Clark received 6 flagrant fouls in her rookie season with a statistical probability of 0.001% if distributed randomly. She accumulated 6 technical fouls, 1 away from suspension, including 1 for hitting a padded pole and another for disagreeing with an out-of-bounds call. She was fined $200 for posting "refs couldn't stop us" after a playoff win. The WNBA has no L2M reports, no independent replay center, and pays its referees $425 per game as contractors who work NCAA ball in the offseason.
The league's head of officiating says they don't fine refs for judgment calls, even as the NBA demotes officials who consistently blow them. And when players like Stephanie White, Natasha Cloud, and Becky Hammon all say the same thing about consistency and control, the league responds with task forces and promises instead of transparency and investment. The Caitlin Clark referee bias story isn't about whether she gets fouled more than other players. The stats prove she does. It's about whether the WNBA will build the accountability systems necessary to prevent one player from absorbing 17% of all flagrant fouls while the league shrugs and says it can't afford transparency. If you want to understand how systemic inequality plays out in real time, this is the blueprint. And if you want to see how other WNBA controversies expose structural issues the league refuses to fix, check out the Locker Room Confidential playlist. Because the referee crisis isn't an isolated problem, it's a pattern, and the pattern reveals who the league actually protects when the whistle blows.